Today we're talking about the secret at the end of the universe. In addition, we'll be talking about the Big Bang. And the reason why we're talking about the Big Bang is because the Big Bang is associated with the beginning. But we're talking about the end. But we're going to see that the end and the beginning are actually intimately related. And we can't understand one without understanding the other. That is how we unlock the secret. And the Big Bang and the beginning is something that science has had an extremely difficult time with. It cannot understand how something can come from nothing. Well, FYI, because that is impossible. And religion has also completely been unable to explain creation without appealing to a creator God whose existence can't be rationally explained itself. itself. So, that's where we are beginning today, with the beginning and the end simultaneously. And we're also going to be looking at an article related to a scientific theory, because as you guys know, I like to show you when articles come out regarding mainstream science that start to approach what we have been talking about for years. So we're going to be exploring the Hyperion cosmology and how it explains both the end and the beginning and the secret at the end of the universe, and how some ideas in science are beginning to approach what we have been saying. So today we are going to be looking at an article that's exploring a theory by Roger Penrose. And the reason why we're going to be looking at this article is because I want to always show you guys when theories in mainstream science are beginning to approach what we're saying. Now, of course, they're quite far off, but they're getting closer and closer to what we have been saying for years. Now, as a quick recap, before we jump into that article, I want to give, for those who may be new, a quick recap of Hyperion cosmology and ontological mathematics. So basically, because this article we're going to be looking at is called "Was There a Bang at the End of the Universe?" which talks about there being, a Big Bang is usually associated with the beginning, but we're asking if could it occur at the end. And we're going to see in Hyperion cosmology, the end is the beginning. And that is an extremely powerful secret, because you see, this reality is not linear, it is cyclical. But to understand this, we have to realize, first of all, that in Hyperionism, everything is grounded in mathematics. This is a mathematical reality. Mathematics expresses itself through sinusoidal waveforms. That means that to say that this is a mathematical reality, ontologically, what is real, that means that this is also a reality of frequency, because ontological mathematics expresses itself in frequency. Now, we have sinusoidal waveforms and we have a system of mathematics. Because these sinusoids and the system of mathematics as a whole contains both positive and negative values, this means as a whole, everything nets to zero. Because if you have a positive value for every negative value, what's the total result? The total result is zero. This is how reality can exist, because reality is actually nothingness. It is zero. But zero isn't, and nothingness isn't empty. It's actually a sea of information as expressed through positive and negative mathematical values, which ontologically is frequency, sinusoids. I know this can be a lot to take in, but remember, I'm trying to summarize a system that would take years to understand in 5 minutes or so, okay? So I have many videos on this on my channel if you want to understand this in more detail. But suffice to say, reality is equal to zero, which is equal to nothingness, balanced by positive and negative mathematical values. This is a mathematical reality that expresses itself in frequency, being sinusoidal waveforms. In Hyperionism, in ontological mathematics, these frequencies, frequency, energy, mind, and light, are all the same concept. These sinusoidal waveforms are zero-dimensional, which is thought. Thought has no dimensions. This is a reality of thought. We can also understand this is a reality of light, a reality of energy, a reality of frequency. These are all just different words for describing the same thing: mathematical sinusoidal waveforms. And the reason why we have all these different words to explain it is because words are very imprecise. The human language is extremely imprecise. As, Wittgenstein or any of these philosophers of language will tell you, human language is extremely imprecise. Mathematics, however, is very precise, it is objective, it follows logical, rational, necessary truths. So really we can only capture the truth of reality through mathematics, but we can do our best to try and describe it via language, but it will never be 100% accurate via language, only via mathematics itself. So keep that in mind as well. So we have this existence. There's a mathematical existence, which is also an existence of mind. Each and every one of us is an eternal mind. You could call this a soul if you wanted to, but this is just a complete set of mathematics, a complete set of frequency patterns, a complete set of sinusoidal waveforms. So, why am I telling you about this? What does this have to do with anything? Well, we have to understand that that is the ground of reality. That is what we're working with. Frequencies, mathematics, mind, light. Okay? And now we're going to use this to understand the Big Bang and Hyperion cosmology and the secret at the end of time. So basically what happened was there was a state where all the frequency patterns exhibited no phase relations, right? We have a no phase relations, zero phase spectrum set to 0. What that essentially means in terms of understanding things simply and easily is that everything was perfectly symmetrical, everything was in harmony. When everything is perfectly symmetrical, everything is in harmony, the material world does not exist at all. There is just a domain of pure mind, of pure frequency, of pure thought. And you can see that humans even intuitively understand this. If you watch science fiction movies, whenever they, talk about highly advanced aliens or something, they eventually transcend their bodies and they're just beings of pure thought, right? That's kind of a silly sci-fi way to look at it, but you can see that humans actually have this intuition built within them to understand that when you get to a certain highest level, things just become pure thought. So there was a state when everything was perfect, everything was in phase, and everything was in harmony. This was a domain of pure thought, no material world whatsoever. Now, when these frequency patterns went from in phase to out of phase, this resulted in the dimensional world of space-time. And we can see this even in Fourier mathematics. When we start adding, altering the amplitudes and adding in phase information, we start to get dimensionality in the space and time domains. So, the Big Bang was actually a mental event where the frequencies of reality went from in phase to out of phase. This resulted in the Big Bang in the space-time universe, in Hyperionism, what we call the holos. And essentially, this sets off a trajectory for us. Evolution occurs, bodies eventually develop, and then minds can link to bodies to then explore the material world. This is very similar to when you have a dream, and your dream can create the illusion of a material world, and then you can insert yourself into your dream and explore your dream world. Same thing here, except we're dealing with all the minds in existence and all the frequencies in existence, forming the collective dream world, the collective holos, and then we can insert ourselves into the avatars, these bodies, to explore, learn, and grow. So here, again, I know that this is a lot of information all at once. Some of you are probably familiar with this already, but we need this background to understand what we're going to look at to see how some ideas in science are starting to come close to what we've been saying for years. Now, so you have this process then of evolution. And also anyone familiar with Hegelian philosophy will see that this is also very, very similar to Hegelian philosophy as well. The idea that others itself into nature and then realizes itself as absolute spirit. So we have ourselves inserted in this material domain. We are evolving, and evolving has a teleological goal. In other words, an endpoint. Remember how I said, look at science fiction movies and how when they show, highly evolved races, they become beings of pure mind and whatnot, right? So we're evolving, we're growing, we're developing. As we grow and evolve and develop, we begin to work together as groups. We begin to work together in harmony. We start to form collectives. We start to iron out all of our conflicts and work together as a group, as a collective. So we're evolving both individually, collectively, mentally. We're all evolving. So this evolution occurs across billions and billions of years. And eventually it will reach a final point. And in Hyperianism, we call this the omega point, or the final cause. And the final cause, or the omega point, is when everything has reached absolute perfection, the pinnacle of evolution, and we return to a state of perfect, pure mind. So at that point, there is no longer any material universe, because everything has been perfected. There is no longer a pure a material universe. Everything has become pure mind, which is pure light, which is pure frequency, which is pure thought. So we have this now domain of pure frequency, pure light, pure thought. And there is no longer a material holos. It is simply the source singularity. And that is an infinitely beautiful moment where we have achieved the pinnacle of evolution and everything is in harmony. Then, what occurs after that? Well, what occurs after that is another big bang. And the whole process starts again. This is mathematically inevitable. It's built into the mathematics of the system. But to understand it in an intuitive way, you can realize that even if everything was perfection, if a perfect moment lasted infinitely, it would become hell. Even, imagine your perfect heaven. Even if that lasted forever, it would eventually become hell. So there is another reset and another big bang at the omega point, at the final cause, once we have exhausted, infinite amount of pleasure, bliss, and satisfaction from that moment. So the thing to understand here is that this is a cyclical reality, because you see that a big bang also occurs at the end, but the end is the beginning of another universe. So you see that the end is the end of an old universe and the beginning of a new universe. That's why in some Gnostic texts it says, those who understand the beginning will understand the end, will know everything, and become immortal. Why? Well, when you understand the beginning, you do understand the end. And because the end is the beginning, and when you have understood the beginning and the end, you realize that this is a cyclical reality, you realize everything is eternal, you realize that you are eternal, and you cannot die. As an eternal mind, your avatar can pass away, but you as the, being comprised of the necessary eternal basis waves of reality can never perish. You are eternal. So, once, and you can get an intuition of this again if you're having a hard time understanding the idea of the beginning and the end. Just take the image of a circle in your mind. If let's say, okay, we're going to draw a circle. I am going to begin here, right? So you begin at this point, and that's the beginning. You draw the circle, and guess what? When you get to the end, it's the same point, right? The beginning and the end, you can see that they exist at the same point. That's a really simplistic, intuitive way to understand it, but hopefully that gives you some way to grasp it. Now, important to understand is that even though this is a cyclical universe and the beginning is the end, every cosmic cycle has different content. So we don't repeat, in the next universal cycle, we don't repeat the exact same lives over again or anything like that. It's cyclical, but each universal cycle will have fresh new content. It's sort of like, if you build something up with a set of Legos, you can break it down again and start a new build something else, but you're building something completely new. Or if you read a book, you can finish the book and start a book again, but it's a completely new book with new stories and new characters. So it's a cyclical reality, but the content is different from one universal cycle to the next. Now, that was a lot, wasn't it? Yes, it was. And I left out a lot. So if this interests you and you haven't heard this before, check out the videos on my channel. I go into all this stuff in a lot more detail. If this is your first time hearing this, I know you probably have a lot of questions. I understand. There's a lot to this. If you are not new, well, there's a little recap, refresher for you, but we are now going to look and see how this relates to a recent article. I think it's recent, actually. Actually, you know what? I don't know if it's recent or not. So, not fairly recent. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So it's titled, Was There a Bang at the End of the Universe? Our universe could have had quite a different origin according to recent observations of the ripples in space-time. So remember, this is a mainstream article now. And I want to show you how some theories in mainstream science are beginning to reflect what we have been saying. Now, they are still a long way off, but I like to always show you guys these things to show how we are the science of the future, and you can be light years ahead of where mainstream science is so, at a snail's pace trying to reach. So, let's begin here. How can something come out of nothing is perhaps the biggest mystery related to the Big Bang. And right away, okay, but let me just keep going here. The most accepted theory of the universe's beginning states that it started as an infinitely small, infinitely dense point that expanded outwards and cooled to become the modern cosmos. But what was the cause of the event nearly 14 billion years ago? Now, first of all, I want to say here, they say, how can something come out of nothing is perhaps the biggest mystery related to the Big Bang. Well, you can see that this is a logical fallacy. Something can never come out of nothing. In Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we know that something is nothing. Now, that might seem like a subtle difference, but it's a huge difference. The difference between something coming out of nothing and nothing being something or being equal to something. So science is scratching their heads going, how can something come out of nothing? The answer is, it can't. The truth is that nothing is something. So once again, in Hyperianism, this is a mathematical reality that all nets to zero because positive and negative values are perfectly balanced. So zero, equated to nothingness, isn't empty. If we were to take zero and, metaphorically peer inside, we would find a sea of frequency patterns. And the reason why this is possible is because all the mathematical values balance out to zero. So this is how something is nothing. Imagine that you have zero, but it is a sea of information, and we can use that sea of information to construct a universe, just like we can use computer code to construct a computer game world. So, metaphorically, this reality is built on the code of mathematics that balances to zero. Nothing and something are equivalent. Something doesn't come from nothing. That's logically fallacious. That is contrary and violates reason. Only reason reveals the truth of reality. But zero being equivalent to positive and negative mathematical values, that's perfectly in line with reason. That's beautifully in line with reason. And from that, we can construct reality having never violated net zero, having never violated nothingness. So really, this is a reality of nothingness that we are viewing from fractured viewpoints to give us the illusion of there being something. Something is somewhat of an illusion. You can imagine sort of, kind of like a kaleidoscope, but if all the pieces were seen at the same time and put in the right order, it would vanish to nothingness. It's kind of a muddied metaphor, but hopefully you see where I'm going here. I'm going to try and keep reading because me and these impassioned, what did I call my rants? Impassioned, I forget now. I always forget. Someone in the chat reminds me. But anyway, let me keep going, or else this is going out of nothing. Well, we can clearly answer this. It doesn't. Nothing is mathematically equivalent to something. Nothing and something are equivalent. So, but what was the cause of the Big Bang nearly 14 billion years ago? Even this is a question loaded with problems. If the Big Bang created time, as conventional thinking says, then you can't talk about before or a prior cause, as those are notions that only make sense if time already existed. Okay, so again, this is also a fallacious way of thinking. So time is just another dimension. Just like space is a dimension, time is a dimension. And we can actually understand time as a form of distance. So to understand this, think about if someone asks you, someone from the other room goes, "Hey, how far away is the supermarket from here?" You can go, "Oh, it's about 5 miles. But think about this. Someone goes, "Hey, how far away is the supermarket from here?" "Oh, it's about 5 minutes. It's about 5 minutes away. It's about 5 miles away." So we can understand time as a certain type of distance, just like we understand space as a certain type of distance. But, and remember, that's a metaphor that I'm using. But the fallacious thing here is that, they're saying that you can't talk about before or a prior cause without time. That's actually false. You can, without having the notion of time, you can still have the notion of logical ordering or logical sequencing. And this is known in philosophy, right? This is a commonly discussed topic in philosophy. It's just, unfortunately, most scientists, most physicists are not very well versed in philosophy. And so they get a lot of ideas wrong, like something coming from nothing, or not understanding time correctly, things like this. So time, you don't need to have time to have logical sequencing or logical ordering. So even without time, you can talk about a logical before. That's perfectly valid rationally, okay? So let's try and get through this. I just want to point out, even in the first 2 paragraphs, we're already encountering, fallacy after fallacy. The reason why I'm pointing this out, again, is showing how Hyperianism and ontological mathematics is the science of the future. We're able to go light years beyond what, even very open-minded, quote-unquote open-minded, mainstream science theories. Anyway, let's continue. Sir Roger Penrose, a longtime collaborator of Stephen Hawking, believes he has a way to banish these problems for good. What's more, astronomers might have found evidence to confirm he's right. His theory is called conformal cyclic cosmology, and it says that the explosive birth of our universe arose during the twilight years of another. In other words, there was a time before the Big Bang. Okay, now we're starting to get into an idea that is a little more familiar to what we're talking about. All right, so we've seen fallacy after fallacy. Now we're going to start to get to some similarities. According to Penrose, there's a mammoth in the room rather than an elephant, an even bigger problem. There's a mammoth in the room that no cosmologist is currently addressing. How the early universe at the Big Bang was in some ways very similar to the state our universe is heading in the distant future. So he's saying this elephant in the room, this mammoth in the room that no cosmologist is addressing, is that the early Big Bang universe is very similar to where the universe is heading in the future. Now you're starting to see the similarity to what we were talking about when I gave you that summary before, and what we have been saying. That the Big Bang was the end of an old universe, the beginning of a new universe, and through evolution we will reach and that cyclic that cycle will occur again and again. To calculate kinetic energy, or the energy of motion, you have the mass and multiply it by its velocity squared. In the first moments after the Big Bang, when the cosmos was very hot, particles were flying around stupendously fast. That means their speed made the majority contributions to the universe's total energy, not the particle's mass. The same can be said of the universe's future. In 1998, physicists discovered that the universe was expanding at an ever-increasing rate, shaking the astronomical community to its core. They had expected the cosmos to be slowing down as the power of the Big Bang waned. So for the expansion to be accelerating again, Astronomers believe that there must be some invisible entity, known as dark energy, pushing everything apart. Eventually, all matter in the universe will be separated to such a great extent that mass becomes a trivial factor in the overall energy of the cosmos. In both cases, the universe will eventually become dominated by light, not matter. You see, remember what I said. In both cases, the universe will eventually become dominated by light, not matter. Remember, in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, mind is thought, is light. And remember how I said at the end of the universe, when we have reached the pinnacle of our evolution, matter will cease to exist, and we will exist in a domain of pure mind, of pure thought, of pure light. Because light is mind, is frequency. Again, I just want to show you how some theories in modern science, even though they're riddled with fallacies and get a lot wrong, are starting slowly to come to the conclusion that we have been saying for years. But they will never get there until they give up materialism and give up empiricism and embrace the science of the future. Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, a rationalist, idealist science based on reason and the mind, not the senses and the fallible, and not the fallible senses and not matter. So, in both cases, the universe will eventually be dominated by light, not matter. And for a photon, which is a massless particle of light, time and length does not exist. Ride along on a photon and you'd zip across the visible universe in literally no time. That insight was Penrose's key breakthrough. And I really want you to contemplate this important, critically important statement. For a photon, a particle of light, time and length does not exist. Ride along on a photon and you zip across the visible universe in literally no time. Why is this the case? Because a photon, light, isn't material. It's not spatial or temporal. It's mind. It is thought. And here you have it saying right here, again, even mainstream science. A photon is a massless particle of light where time and length does not exist. Light is not spatial or temporal, because thought is not spatial or temporal. It gives rise to the spatial temporal universe, but it itself is not spatial or temporal. It is a mind. And that is why at the end of time, we will exist in a domain of pure mind, which is a domain of pure light, because light and mind are equivalent. Time does not exist. Spatiality does not exist. It is pure mind, pure thought. That insight was Penrose's key breakthrough. In both cases, the universe doesn't know how big it is, Penrose said. As far as the universe is concerned, its hot, small beginning is physically identical to its cold, huge future. That in itself isn't controversial. But Penrose goes a step further. This remote future becomes another Big Bang, he says. So what happened before the Big Bang? According to Penrose, what happened before the Big Bang was that another universe ended. And that universe sprung from the death of yet another. Penrose calls each period an eon. The eons go further, and we call these universal cycles. But Penrose calls this an eon. This is purely, sure they could be called eons, but we're talking about the same thing here. The eons go further and further back in time with no need for an initial beginning. In some ways, its return to the steady state model that prevailed before the Big Bang gained significant traction in the mid-20th century. So here you have Penrose, the scientist, putting forth this theory that the Big Bang was the end of an old universe. Previous to that was another universe. Previous to that was another universe. Previous to that was another universe. And all of this that we've been reading is in line with Hyperianism and ontological mathematics and what we have been saying for years. Now, however, there is a key difference that's very important to realize, and that is that in our system, underlying the physical universe is the domain of pure mind. So, you know how it says that that light will dominate? In Hyperianism, this domination of light, this is the omega point. This is the final cause when everything has become pure mind, pure light, pure thought, pure frequency, and everything only exists as the source singularity. So yes, you have these cyclical physical universes, but all of this is underpinned by the domain of mind. And this is important because let's use the analogy of a computer video game world being the physical world. So the idea would be, as soon as that video game world ends, another video game world begins. And when that video game world ends, another video game world begins. That's all well and good. But the important thing to understand is that also there is a code in the background allowing this process to happen and occur. So that is important to understand. Do you see the difference in ontological mathematics and Hyperianism? In the background of these physical universes ending and beginning is the mathematical code, the domain of pure mind, the domain of pure thought. So, yes, the universe is cyclical. The end is the beginning. The end of the old universe is the beginning of a new universe. But this is a mathematical reality, a reality of mind, and the domain of pure mind, the domain of pure frequency, the domain of pure light, the domain of mathematical frequency is the code that allows for this process to happen. And once the world begins to understand this, we will be able to create a much more cohesive society. And you go, why? What does that matter? What does understanding this have to do with creating a cohesive society? Well, when we understand the process of reality being mathematical, mental, and teleological, and remember, this omega point, the final cause, is also us as a collective becoming God, becoming the absolute. So when the world begins to understand this, we will begin to form much more cohesive and collective and harmonious societies, a collective harmonious world society, because we will understand where we are headed and how to get there. We are headed towards the omega point. We are headed towards the final cause. And this is facilitated by the evolution of mind, which is the evolution of mathematical symmetry, which means for us to get there, we have to operate as a harmonious collective, because we are an expression of mathematics. That's what we are. Mathematics that has expressed itself and othered itself. And for mathematics to evolve and create higher degrees of symmetry means for us as a collective to work together and create more symmetrical, more harmonious societies, because we realize that we all exist in one integrated system. We are both one and many, and we form that integrated, connected system that must work together. And this is why it's so important. People, ask, what's the point of understanding existence? Why, It's because it will literally change everything. Understanding this information and really integrating it and knowing what it means, being able to connect the dots, will put you into a higher mode of existence, a literal new state of consciousness. Just how evolution went from instinctual animal existence to self-aware humans. Hyperianism is ushering a phase change, a new phase of existence, bringing humanity from self-awareness to absolute awareness. And understanding this new science is critical for a collective awakening and stepping in to a new consciousness and establishing a new world. A big shout out to all my supporters on Patreon, especially these top supporters: Kurikumo, Timothy, Rex, Naruda, Rupfu, Renaissance Fairy, and our top supporters here as well. Supporting on Patreon is the best way to support my channel. You get access to our weekly secret live streams, and we're having a secret live stream right after this. And you also get access to some of my lecture notes, downloads, things like that. So consider supporting. It means the world to me.